Okay. Introduce yourself.
Oh God. I'm Jessie Ngaio. I am a visual artist, a painter. I make soft sculptures. I'm also a performer. I do clown. I'm trained in Red Nose Clown and Butoh, which is a Japanese contemporary performance art style. It's kind of punky and anarchistic and weird. Yes.
What's your background? How did you get started?
Well, I was always drawing. Like, I grew up in a house where I think it was both my parents were quite encouraging of me just drawing all the time, and they also pretended that we didn't have that they couldn't afford to fix the TV and that it had broken. So for a long time we didn't have a television, so I had to entertain myself. But also I was home a lot with what at the time was diagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome, but I now think was actually just undiagnosed autism. And so I missed a lot of school, and then when I was 15, I went back to school for the first time since I was 10, I think, and was really behind in the rest of the classes. But I did like my first art class at 15 at high school, and we did this painting of some goods, and the teacher just held it up and said, "This is amazing," to the class. And then he told my parents in a parent-teacher interview that they were really excited the staff because it was rare for them to get a real artist, whatever that means. But it was sort of during a time in my life where there wasn't, like, I was a pretty miserable, unhappy person. Like, I was already having suicidal ideation at 12, so to like be told I was good at something and to get this positive attention was, I guess, just really nice. So I kind of feel like I went into art for positive attention, which actually is probably a bad idea, because most of art, being an artist, as I'm sure you know, is like dabbling away in obscurity. Yeah, but that's sort of what got me started. And then once you start, it's like, it's an addiction that I don't feel like I can stop, and I don't know how to stop. And when I try to stop, I go loopy. Yeah.
Is that a function of autism?
Yeah, I have actually been thinking that. So I only realised last year that I'm autistic. Like, I spent a lifetime trying to figure out what's going on with this. And I've talked to a few people who are artists with autism, and they definitely feel like art making is a sort of stim. It's definitely a thing for me that helps me just process. I'm definitely like very visual, and I've heard the autistic brain described like when people are young, their brains kind of just this is my layman description of it, their brains go in lots of directions and have lots of connections, but as you get older, it sort of fine-tunes down to a few sort of fewer pathways, which kind of makes sense. It helps you sort of get by in the world and do the things. But with autism, that doesn't go away, so you're always taking in the same bombardment of data and stuff and sensory input, which is definitely how I feel. I feel like the world is just constantly throwing stuff and visuals and things. So art making is like a way of filtering that. And also it's definitely a stim. Like, if I'm not doing something with my hands or my body, I feel, I don't know, like maybe if I lived like near the ocean and not under late stage capitalism, I wouldn't need art, but I feel like art is my way of processing and alchemizing overwhelm and stuff, I think.
So in your art making, I guess it would give you like a calming effect
Yeah.
in the performance as well.
That's a good question. I don't think sometimes it's calming. Like painting definitely can be very soothing. But it can also be horrible and infuriating, and it's that weird sort of masochistic element of art making, which is like you kind of love the pain as well, or the struggle, because it's stimulating, I guess. Sometimes it's not so much calming, it's almost more, it's also sensory seeking as well, or like trying to, I saw this artist recently do a talk, Bonnie Whitlock, and she was talking about her paintings and how her family has this colour they've always used. She called it a matrilineal colour, which is turquoise, and she does these big paintings that she described almost as cocoons for herself, creating spaces that are welcoming or creating a world that's sort of okay to be in. And I think one of the reasons I love Butoh, Melbourne has a really good Butoh scene, and my teacher Yumi often says, like, the world is too logical and rational, and with Butoh it's kind of about going into your weirdness, and the shows are these big mishmash of like all these different people doing all these different crazy things, but then Yumi sort of choreographs them. So it sort of, to me, looks like, when you look down on a slide and you see all the things happening, like little things over here are like splitting apart, and the little bugs are like vibrating and eating each other over here. And yeah, so I guess it's kind of like a way, I guess calming doesn't feel like quite the right word, because I don't know if I know what calm feels like. I don't think I'm very calm in general. But it's maybe it does. Like, maybe if I wasn't doing it, then I would just be like one of those people who's like out there driving into other people in fits of rage or something. So yeah, probably it is calming, and this is me at my calmed state.
You mentioned that the colour, the turquoise and a cocoon, something like that. Can you explain a little bit more about that? Do you have a colour like that, or something like that?
Yeah, I don't have a colour. I have, I think, all colours. I definitely feel like there is a painting is, it's okay, so sorry, I've had like 10 thoughts collide at once.
Me too, actually. It's probably
Excellent.
making no sense to anyone watching.
Good. They can embrace the chaos. Yeah, so these days a lot of my art is really concerned with sort of ecological questions, and so I have a little bit of guilt and mixed feelings about the fact that I still paint a lot, because like I'm using, like, acrylic paints are plastic, and I don't know where those pigments are coming from, but for me it's such a sensorial experience, like using lots of colors for me. I don't think I have synesthesia, but I do have a very intense emotional pleasure reaction to colors, and to bright, bold colors, also to sort of more natural colors. But when I'm painting, there's something really exciting about intense colors. It's almost kind of like when I'm painting, I'm not someone who paints in silence. I always have like music at the top level, and like I'm always, a little bit intoxicated or something, like, for me, and sort of dancing around the canvas and having a loud, fun time. So I think, for me, I think colours are also, like, when I go into the city and it's just full of grey buildings and everyone's in, like, black suits, and there was this thing I read recently about this idea of chromophobia, which is this idea of the West's fear of colour. Like, colour is wild and crazy and irrational, and then there's like greys and blacks and white, which are like, civilized somehow. And I think in general, for me, in art making, I'm drawn to things that are like this sort of sense of the wild, the passionate, the emotive, all the things you're sort of not really necessarily supposed to do at art school. Like, I've only been to 1 year of art school in Melbourne, but it was very like rational and conceptual. And I think as I get older and as I get interested in, like decolonizing and thinking about just our value systems, and I feel like we've put this real value on rationality as if that's even really a thing. So for me, colour is the sensorial, it's the wild, it's the untamable, it's the other. Because I've always been interested in like that concept of the other, like the person who stands on the outskirts of society, the person who's doesn't fit in, the person who hasn't been civilized, or I don't know. I keep making this shape.
Where do you think like monochromatic artworks fit in with that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, like, as I was saying it, I was like, well, I don't want to sound like I'm shit-talking monochromatic artwork, because I'm definitely not. And recently have been thinking it'd be really interesting, actually, to explore what it would be to make monochromatic art for myself. Like, what would that be? And maybe that's just because I'm getting older and calmer as well. I have a very, in general, I like the quote I have on my studio wall is by Christo, and it's, "The work of art is a scream of freedom." And I don't like hierarchies or value systems in the art world. I actually love a lot of conceptual work. I actually love a lot of work that is quite intellectual. I just don't like when that's held as the way to do things, or, there are some galleries where you look at, it's like they have a color palette they always curate somehow. And yeah, like when I was at uni, I got really interested in the color pink. Like, I was just painting everything pink because I was sort of questioning stuff about gender and my own sexuality, and also being a short young woman who was sort of coming to realize how much was imposed upon her. Like, I got called cute a lot and realized that was my destiny. Like, when I'm an old lady, I'm going to get called cute because I'm going to be small. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going. I'm rambling. Something about monochromes you asked. Yeah, I don't think I have a particular opinion. Some of them are great. I just don't like it when there's like this feeling that, I don't know, sometimes it feels like if you paint too many colours, you're kitsch. And that's the other thing, like, I love kitsch. I've always gravitated towards the lowbrow. I've worked on and off all my adult life. All my adult life, I have worked on and off in porn and also comedy, and just, this sounds weird, but there's an overlap there for me of sort of like, I did a theatre show called Slutmonster and Friends, and it was very, very filthy, but it was also about about shit, like it was about colonialism and gender roles and shit. But I don't know, I don't like that distinction between highbrow and lowbrow, and I don't like when the arts becomes, I don't like how inaccessible the arts can become.
Who do you think drives that inaccessibility?
I don't think.
Or what? I don't know if I said who, but yeah, what drives it?
Yeah, who? George. I think it's like, I mean, there's a lot to that, right? There's definitely capitalism, but I think sometimes I have a theory about Australia. I can't speak to the entire art world because, to be honest, I spend a lot of time just doing my own thing and trying not to think too much about the bigger art world. I mean, I look at lots of art, but I'm not trying to I only recently learnt that a blue ticket gallery is a thing, for example. I only heard that term because I saw a meme online.
Can you enlighten me?
A blue ticket gallery, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but as far as I understand, it's like a gallery that shows artists who command high prices for their artwork.
Oh, kind of like a blue chip
Blue
stock.
chip. Maybe it's blue chip gallery.
It's blue chip, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah. So this is how.
That's all right. We got there.
Yeah, we did. So my theory, I feel like with Australia, there might be a little bit of insecurity in white Australia, like, because this is a sort of thing of we're not Europe, we're all the way down the bottom of the world, and I don't know, there's this sort of thing of, I've just noticed, like if you look at the art world in America and like the contemporary art scene, it's insane. It's full of like paintings that are just, like there's the pop culture, the pop surrealist movement and stuff like that. Like there's a lot more. No, I see, as soon as I start saying something, I disagree with myself. So it's really hard. But I feel like there is some sort of a little bit of insecurity here that makes people want to put up the sort of I'm an intellectual defense. Like I'm educated, I know what I'm doing. But I think also there's cultural capital, there's the thing of, there's also just time. Like I can make art and was able to make art and was able to go to art school because I got supported by my family, which is pretty rare. And then now I can make art because I'm supported by my partner, but a lot of people aren't. So I think art also belongs to people who, like the institutions belong to people who already have financial capital and cultural capital because they have money and time.
It is a privilege to be able to make art.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even more so to have any chance of getting support in the arts. But I do also feel like there's this trick that capitalism has played on us, which I've been thinking about recently, where you're not valuable unless you're doing a thing. And the thing is actually just like working and making money. But we sort of undervalue lots of things. Like we undervalue teachers, we undervalue education, we undervalue, nurses don't get paid enough. So I feel like there's some sort of like, there's this, it's too layered because the arts is fucking full of snobbery, but then also the world at large also sort of undervalues the arts. So then it's like the arts gets more defensive and the world gets more like, oh, you're all a bunch of wankers. And we sort of forget that art actually is play. Like, art is the nature of all of us. We all have creativity in us, and art to me should belong to everyone. I did this theatre workshop on commedia dell'arte, which is like an old Italian comedy style, and the teacher at the end of the workshop, he said theatre should be for everyone. Like, everyone should stand up in front of their community and tell their story at some point. And you know, once upon a time the campfire was the theatre. Like, you had the nighttime, you had the fire, you had nothing to do, so you told stories and you sung songs and acted things out for each other.
Are you trying to bridge that gap in your work, or can it be bridged, that gap, even?
I would like to. That's a great question. I do feel like one of my core drives is to keep my art practice wild. There's this website called the Dark Mountain Project, and it's got this manifesto, the Dark Mountain Manifesto, and it's called Uncivilization, and it's this idea that the world we've created right now, it's failed, it's falling apart, and their sort of premise is, let's accept this, let's accept that the myth of progress is a myth and everything's crumbling. And what we need to start doing is finding stories and telling stories of the non-human, of the wilderness, of people who don't live in the cities. And I think, sort of going back to my childhood of being diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, for a long time there was a lot of shame in me that I only processed a few years ago, because I felt like I had lied about being sick, which I kind of had, but I was talking to a therapist and they were like, yes, but that was you protecting yourself. And I feel like when I look at the studies of the life expectancy of people with autism and the way they're bullied and the social struggles, I realize actually by keeping myself out of the schooling system, which I saw as a thing that set me back for so long, and I've sort of carried as this weight of, that you know, not finishing high school meant I didn't get this thing, and I haven't had this accolade, and I haven't met this life goal point, and next year I turn 30, and what the fuck do I have to show for it? But actually, when I sort of look at my deeper intent, there is this desire to not follow those things because I think they're fucked. And art, I think there's a quote I really like, which is from Tony Cade Bambara, which is the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. Sorry, I said that really badly. The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And I feel like the revolution isn't just about I've been part of activist circles and stuff, and activism is really important, but I feel like the role of art is maybe also to consider our actual consciousness about things. So I guess I just sort of use myself and my relationship to my work as a bit of a experiment in what is it to be free, what is it to create a life that isn't going by the rules, what is it to try to make your art and your life to your values and to your heart, and can that be something that offers something for other people? Because I feel like a lot of sickness and mental health struggles, at least for me, and so therefore I think maybe other people have been around, not actually people being the problem. Like I don't see my autism as a problem, but the world isn't designed for me being autistic and therefore is hard. And I've felt for many years a lot of shame about what I am. But when you see like a tree that's all weirdly shaped because, you know, there was a tree here, so it had to grow this way to get the sun, you don't go, oh, that's a sick tree. You go, what, isn't life amazing for growing to that shape? So I guess I just like the idea of like every artist who makes their work offering a new, being like a tree that's a different shape. And like I was reading this article recently about the Amazon and how most trees in the Amazon are rare. Like they're actually, there's not like a monoculture of species. It's actually like all these different, there's so many different species of plant in the Amazon, and they think that's like one of the secrets to a healthy, flourishing biodiversity. But we sort of are weirdly, like with humans, we're like, no, the answer is that everyone behave the same. And I guess I just like art as a constant, for me, is a constant seeking of a rejection of that in one way or another.
So when you come up with your concepts for performance and your paintings and things like that, is the goal to get the viewer to understand you? I'm guessing you're not that concerned, or you don't measure success as kind of selling a painting for an obscene amount of money, although we'd all like to do that.
Yeah, I was like, part of me does.
Yeah. Is that what you're trying to do?
I hope for some degree of, a couple of years ago I realised I do actually want some degree of recognition and financial success as an artist, because this is what I love doing. And it's weird how we have this thing where it's like, no, I do the art for the art's sake, because no one has to say that about their other job. Like if someone's got a career, you know, as as a businessman, I don't know, as you know, if someone's got a career doing as a doctor, they're not expected to just do it for the love. They're also allowed to want financial security and, you know, recognition for what they do. But for some reason with the arts, we're kind of not supposed to want that on some level, or at least I felt like I couldn't. And only a couple of years ago I sort of acknowledged to myself, actually no, I do want that, but I don't want that by compromising what I want to do, because I think the role of the artist is to actually to sort of go beyond the normal social rules, to push past those, to explore new terrain, whether that's psychological or just weird crazy shit, but some sort of freedom. So yeah, there is definitely, like, I can't escape the people pleaser in me who wants to be liked, but whenever I make art, I try to sort of put her aside as much as possible and go into what I actually care about or what's exciting me at the time, because otherwise I just get really blocked up as well. I find when I'm following my excitement, I make a lot more art, and then some of it connects with people, but I've found I just can't control that. Like, I'll do something I think is kind of and someone buys it for a ton of money. Well, not a ton. What's a ton to me?
How do you personally thread that needle between wanting to make work that's commercially appealing and compromising your, I guess, artistic integrity? I mean, that's a fine balancing act.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would hold myself up as a example of great commercial success. I think I'm possibly going to always be a little bit on, you know, a little bit niche, but I try to, my current strategy, we'll see how it goes, is to not change what I do, but to try more openly talk about it and allow people into the behind the scenes, to try draw people in. There's this I do this, I'll read like the blurb of something and then incorporate it without actually necessarily having read the book, but there's this thing I was reading recently about the idea of building belief-based tribes, or sort of audiences for your art who are drawn to your art based on the sort of stuff behind the below the surface, and that's like my feeling. Like, and I have had some degree of success with that. Like when I've done projects where I've gone, no, I know if I go deep into who I am, that's going to mean something to other people. Unfortunately, maybe because of that, when I dive deeply into who I am, like queer, autistic, weirdo woman, my audience are mostly that, and none of us have a lot of money.
What do you think? Do you think, and this is not my opinion, by the way, I just want to qualify this question by saying that.
Can I give a disclaimer to everything I've said?
I mean, you can if you want, but I guess, you know, some of the subject matter in your work and things like that, some people, I'd imagine, would find that a bit maybe off-putting would be the word. I almost forgot my question. How do you think that affects your ability to bring your work to in front of collectors who are interested in buying? Do you think that it hurts you a little bit?
Yeah, I would say it does. I mean, for one thing, I'm almost constantly shadow banned on social media, because my work deals with sexuality a lot, or even not sexuality, sometimes just the body. But we live in interesting times, and the internet is American. So I know in that way, in a very tangible way, I struggle to I cannot push past those algorithms, because I do work that has tits, and that gets my work often deleted, but also stops it being put on people's For You pages and stuff. I do also, though, probably shoot myself in the foot, because I have a little bit of a fuck the institution attitude and don't necessarily approach collectors and galleries in the first place. There's a bit of a, I don't know, rejection sensitivity, dysphoria, used to doors being closed, so why am I even going to knock at the doors? I'd rather spend my energy doing what I love, but that can also be a bit self-sabotaging. But yeah, I also, like, one of the things that has supported my ability to be an artist, besides support from the people around me, has been sex work, has been porn mostly, and that has actually been quite a liberating thing, and has formed a lot of my social circles, a lot of my deepest friendships, connections, and experiences. And so that comes through in my art, and I guess that's the sort of activist in me, and that's the queer in me that is not willing to hide who I am for financial gain. It's, yeah.
When you say porn, you mean as in as an actor?
I worked as a video editor and but yes, also as an actor. Performer.
I wasn't sure what the right word.
Yeah, sometimes acting, depending on the gig. Yeah, a lot of self-made stuff as well. I've done sort of more sort of feminist queer stuff for film festivals and stuff a little bit. And yeah, when I was in my early 20s, I read this essay by Alan Moore called Bog Venus versus Nazi Cockring, and he was talking about, you know, the Venus of Willendorf, and he was like, everyone says it's a symbol of fertility and stuff, but what if the dude, it was just some caveman carving it so he had something to jacket to? And he was talking about how the Victorian era had this really unhealthy influence on our attitudes towards sexuality and sexual expression in art particularly, and how because of this idea that sexuality is lowbrow and in the gutter, then it sort of relegates that to the gutter, and relegates the expressions of the erotic to sort of, you know, because we push it underground, we then actually make it less safe, and that this is the truth of sex work itself, like not just porn, but actual, you know, full service sex work. Like New Zealand has fully legalized it, and we're getting more and more laws here that allow for it. And what that does, like Amnesty International about 10 years ago released a statement saying places that give sex worker rights, women are safer. There's less violence against women. Sex workers have less violence committed against them. So when we put sexuality to the sort of hush, this is bad, this is not good, this is violence against women, all these things, it actually creates violence. So for me, even though it kind of fucks me over in regards to being very sellable, I can't not do art about this stuff because like one of my partners for 4 years, who I loved deeply, was a full service sex worker, and I really care about that issue, and just can't quite I already quiet myself a little bit. I do in some ways. I'm trying to find ways to talk about that stuff that might be just a little bit more, because I do want to reach more audiences, but I can't ultimately just not do it, even though I'd probably have more success if I just painted like portraits and landscapes and stuff. No shade on those things.
So would you consider that part of your art practice?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Deeply interwoven. Yeah.
Look, I think I've got one more question for you. It goes back to something you said right at the start.
Ooh.
You said when you were young you had suicidal ideation. I'm hoping that's not there anymore. And what I want to ask is how all these things that we've been talking about has helped with that. Has the art making, even the porn stuff and all that, has that helped with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually a really great segue into a plug.
Plug away.
I have a show that I did in Fringe Festival last year called Oh Yuck, It's Me, and it was all about my own struggles with suicidal ideation and emotional abuse, and drawing some parallels between our sort of relationships with ourselves, with each other, and with the planet, because of my own interest in, you know, the fact that we're living in end times and wanting to try do my bit to help us not be in end times. But that show, the core premise was, one of the big core premises was about how through life we get taught in so many ways that how we feel and what we are is bad and wrong, and how deeply we blame ourselves for our own struggles. Like I had, for 10 years, I couldn't actually paint because I had a chronic pain condition, thoracic outlet syndrome, which only a couple of years ago I got some surgeries for. So I've actually only been painting properly again for the last few years. And so up until quite only a few years ago, I was still very suicidal, and in 2017 I came the closest I ever have to taking my own life. I was with a partner in an unhealthy relationship at the time that sort of became emotionally abusive, and I nearly jumped in front of a train in New York. And when I came home, the horror of that hit me because it had literally been a couple of seconds away from happening. And I started to examine why I had, because I realized, I promised to my partner, Wes, that I wasn't going to do it. And I meant that promise because I saw, when I came home and I saw the pain in his eyes, and the realization hit me of the impact me taking my life would have on my loved ones, in particular Wes, who had given me 10 years at that point of just unconditional support and love. And so I realized, okay, I need to stay alive, but how the hell am I going to do that? And through that process turned towards, there was a book I read called How to Be Sick by a woman, a Buddhist who has a chronic illness, and she had this quote in it which was, pain is not a punishment, pleasure is not a reward. And I realized all my struggles in my life, I had internalized them and thought I was the one doing this to myself. And realizing, just coming to compassion and to acceptance has been really, really life-changing. I've become a secular Buddhist over the last couple of years, and becoming more and more interested in practices of ritual and magic and sort of things that are about earth and groundedness and interconnectivity, and sort of realized that time, that awakening to my own self-love was also my eco-awakening, was my realization my love for the planet had to be the same as my love for myself, that they're the same thing. I hope that's an answer. I feel very rambly today.
No, that's a good answer. Beautiful answer.
Oh, and I should plug the show because I'm doing it again in Midsummer in 2024 at the end of January. So that's my plug.
That's good. You can plug something else if you want. You still got a chance.
Oh, well, I guess just my website, jngaio.com, and my Instagram, jngaio.
That'll be in the description.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad at self-promotion.
Most of us are.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jessie, for coming along and sharing your story and your art.
Thank you for having me. I hope it wasn't too meandery. I've seen these infographics of like, get a neurodiverse person to tell a story, and it's this. It's
Well, people can always rewind.
They can, and they're welcome to ask me more questions, and I'll give them another paragraph novel.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.